Today we are celebrating Snana Yatra. Yatra in Sanskrit means journey. You go on a Tirtha Yatra, you're going on a journey to Tirthas, to holy places. So this is Snana Yatra. It's the journey to bathing. The word yatra, although it means journey, literally in Sanskrit, it also has come to mean festival. So whenever there's a big procession or a big festival, that's also called a yatra. And so next week we'll be celebrating Ratha Yatra, the festival of the chariot. Sometimes mispronounced Ratha Yatra, but it's Ratha Yatra. It's a festival of the chariot, and it's also a procession. Or you'll have the Shobha Yatras in many villages or in neighborhoods in India. They'll have these Shobha Yatras. You must have had this when you were a kid, right? So the local temple in your neighborhood will occasionally, the deity will come out of the temple and be carried on a palanquin or in a bullock cart through the neighborhood. And then pious people will come out from their homes. It's usually scheduled. You know when the Shobha Yatra is coming. And so you cook some kheer, some sweet rice, or maybe you bring some fruits, and you'll bring those out. So as the deity's going by your home, you'll come out of your home and you'll bring these offerings that you've cooked during that day, and then you'll present them to the priests who are there attending to the deity that's being carried on the back of an elephant or on a palanquin or in a bullock cart, or even on somebody's head. They may also carry, they may have a palanquin and people are carrying on their shoulders. And then people will come out, and they're moving very slowly with kirtan, and usually there's like a lot of noise. So sometimes it's kirtan, nice melodious kirtan. Sometimes it's just people banging gongs and just making a lot of ruckus. It depends on the skill of the pujaris and the devotees in that particular temple. You must have seen this as a kid growing up too, Adiprabhu. So these Shobha Yatras are very common on all, certain days of the week or on holy days. The deity comes out, it's carried through the streets, and then pious people will come out. The ladies of the household will come out, and they'll bring a bowl of kheer or some fruits, whatever it might be. And then the pujaris will offer that to the deity. And then sometimes they'll take some of it if it looks good. If it looks nice, they'll take some of it. That oftentimes happens. They'll take half of whatever you're offering, and then they give the rest back to you. And that's prasad. And then you take that home, and then you honor that as the fruits of your offering to the deities. So the Shobha Yatra, Ratha Yatra, Tirtha Yatra, and then this now that we're going to do is called a Snana Yatra. It's a festival of bathing. This particular festival, although it's done all over Odisha, which is a small-ish state, very poor state, on the eastern seaboard of India, it's below Bengal and above Andhra, just kind of nestled right in there on the eastern seaboard of India. This festival is actually done all over Odisha now, but the start is there's a big temple in Odisha, and it's called Jagannath Mandir. And so the Jagannath temple is in a small seaside town called Jagannath Puri, located in this very poor state of Odisha in India, which is largely rural. It has some large cities, but the bulk of the state, like most states in India, is rural, but it's particularly poor and rural. You know, if you were to say to somebody that you are from Odisha, from somewhere else in India, if you're from that place, you're very proud of being from that place. But if you were to say to somebody else, it's kind of like saying you're from Tennessee or Missouri or Georgia. It's a place with a heritage. But when you look at sort of the entirety of the U.S., those places are thought of as being slightly less sophisticated, less developed. And so there's a temple in a small town called Jagannath Puri, and that temple is called the Jagannath Mandir. And the Jagannath Mandir is a Krishna temple. And the temple is at the center of the city. So the whole city, they used to have these radio cities where there would be a radio tower, or we have the same thing, we have a downtown area. And the downtown area is the center of a city. You don't really experience this in Los Angeles, which is really spread out geographically. It's the largest city in the world geographically. But in many cities, you have a downtown area, and then the whole city grows up around that downtown. Boston is like this. New York is like this. Phoenix, Arizona is like this. Southern California is a bit of an exception to this rule, because it's essentially from Ventura, more or less, all the way down to Tijuana. It's just one big city connected by freeways. But in other cities, there'll be farmland all around the city. And in the center of the city are these high-rise buildings. And then the suburbs grow out from that area. Jagannath Puri is like that. The center of the city is this temple of Jagannath. And just like you have these, they're not called roundabouts, they're called, what are the circular...
Rotary.
I'm sorry?
A rotary?
It's called a rotary. What are those circles around? It's like a beltway, which goes around the city. It's a circular freeway which is built around the city. And then there'll be spokes coming off of that circular freeway that go directly into the city. Are you guys familiar with this? Washington, D.C. has a beltway. That means it was started like this. There was a center point in the city, and it grew out from that center point. And so eventually they built a beltway, which is just a circular road that goes around the suburbs with then spokes coming off of the beltway that lead you into the streets, that lead you into the downtown area. Jagannath Puri is like that. The main drag of the city, the main street of the city, Main Street in Jagannath Puri is right there at the temple. The temple is at the heart of Main Street. And if you go to Odisha, it's unique in all of India, because they have a Patachitra form of art, an indigenous form of art. They also have indigenous weaving. They have a particular type of cloth that they weave. What's this cloth called? Huh? The cloth you're wearing, what's it called? Ikat. Yeah, ikat is a more general name for a cloth where the threads are dyed and then you sew it together after the threads are dyed, and it exists all over the world. Ikat cloth is, so there's two ways you can dye cloth. You can either make the cloth and then dye it subsequently, or you can dye the individual threads and then you sew them together. And when you have cloth where the threads are dyed and then they're woven together expertly to form the designs, that's ikat cloth. And it's a primitive form of sewing, of weaving. And the cloth in Odisha is this ikat cloth. And amazingly, the designs on the saris that come out of Odisha, they have certain standard motifs. This is true all over India. But in Odisha, the motifs are the conch, the lotus, the chakra, and the club. They're the symbols of Vishnu. Because Jagannath is world famous in Odisha. If they have a deity of Ganesh and you paint a picture of Ganesh, they'll paint a picture of Ganesh with Jagannath's face, the big eyes and the face. Or if they have a deity of Narasimha, they'll make a deity of Narasimha with Jagannath's face. If they do the Das avatars. Like I just had a gentleman contact me. He went to Laguna Beach High School, and he's a very successful artist. And in 1976 and 1977, he painted a 10 foot by 10 foot, very large painting of the Das avatars, which is 10 individual pictures of the Das avatars. The Krita Yuga is on the bottom, Treta Yuga is up the side, then Dwapar Yuga is on the top, and then Kali Yuga is on this side and in the middle. Kalki is in the middle. And so he has this beautiful painting that he painted 45 years ago that's been hanging in his home here in the area for 40 years. He's a professor, taught art, went to UC Berkeley for art, went to also fine art school after that, and then taught art at several universities. He's quite accomplished artist, has a bunch of his paintings hanging up. And he contacted us and said, will you accept this painting of the Das avatars to display somewhere in your temple? I'm selling my home and I'm moving. I'm downsizing. I'm an old man now. But I have this beautiful 10 foot by 10 foot painting and I want to go to a place where it will be installed and properly viewed. This happens when people get old. They want to leave a legacy. They don't want to die and have their life's work be all for naught. And so they try to pass on their legacy, either in the form of an inheritance or an endowment or something of that nature. So he wanted to do that with his art. I looked at the painting. He sent, of course, a beautiful, large picture of the painting. So I looked at it carefully, and I noticed all the different deities and how he had conceived of them. He's extremely skilled. And it was, 50 years ago he was extremely skilled. And he said, yes, it's painted with egg tempera. Egg tempera. Which, of course, none of you know what that is. Any of you know what that is? You do? You have an art history background? No.
I took an art history class in high school. That's it.
Okay. Egg tempera is that it used to be that when they wanted paints to last for a long time, they would use a medium like egg yolks to be the liquid because it lasted longer. And so they would mix pigments with egg yolks and then they would paint in that. And in fact, if you go to Orthodox churches, Eastern Orthodox churches, Greek Orthodox churches, all of their iconography in their churches are painted with eggs. It's an extremely old style of painting. You can find it on Egyptian tombs, and the paintings survive for thousands of years. Of course, we find this to be totally disgusting, and we could never accept his painting on that basis alone. So I had to let him down, appreciate him, but let him know there was no way for us to take a bunch of eggs and put them on a wall in our temple, irrespective of how good the art was. In general, also, we want paintings made by our devotees. Even if they're less expertly done, we want paintings which are made by our devotees who are of pure character. And so within our iconography, we don't just care about the medium you use or the style, but we also care about the caliber of the individuals who are doing the painting. I, of course, didn't tell him that because that would be tantamount to insulting him to say that you don't have the adhikar or the qualifications to paint, irrespective of your material qualification. You don't have the spiritual qualifications to paint an icon for our temple. I couldn't say such a thing to him. But the egg tempera is enough all by itself. But anyway, he wanted to do something. He lacked the discretion to realize that we're all vegan. And so he wanted to do something which was authentic. And so he picked an old religious means of painting, but it was just that he picked the wrong one for a Hindu temple. Anyway, if you go to Jagannath Puri, all of their paintings have Jagannath's face. All of their temples have Jagannath's face. Almost like graffiti. almost like Jagannath is not only the deity, but also the mascot for the whole state. And I'm assuming Odisha has, it's got to have, 20 million people? 30 million people? Would you guess? What would be your guess? Something like that, right? It's a small state, but we're still talking about a population of, 20, 30, 50 million people. It's not tiny by any stretch of the imagination. So all of their painting, all of their weaving, their saris, their architecture, everything. Let somebody know it's a problem, some adult. Yeah, you got to handle your business, man. Yeah, I can hear him. I won't say nothing. You got to handle it. There's nothing like this in all of India. Even you go to Tamil Nadu, where you have the Venkateshwar temple, there's not this universal, ubiquitous, all-present artistic feature where the deity of a small town has become the deity of a whole state, has found their way into all of their art. Am I mistaken on this, or is this accurate? It's accurate, right? It's really a special place. And it's a holy place for us. Our savants, our saints, ended up settling in 3 places: Vrindavan, Mayapur, and Jagannath Puri. And if you were to say there was one place most associated with our tradition, it's Jagannath Puri. It's where Mahaprabhu resided for 18 out of the last 24 years of his pastimes. Everybody went there. Rup Sanatan went there on pilgrimage. Sarup Damodar resided there. Gadadhar resided there. Nityananda Prabhu went there on pilgrimage every year. Everybody went there every year. It was the place you would go on Tirtha Yatra. You might live in Vrindavan, you might live in Bengal, but you would go on pilgrimage to Jagannath Puri. And in many ways, the Hare Krishna movement took birth in Jagannath Puri about 500 years ago. And our religion grew up around the worship of Jagannath, Baladev, and Subhadra. And in fact, those deities are worshipped in all of our temples. And if you look on our altar, you see on the right side Jagannath, Baladev, and Subhadra. They're what would be called, from an iconographic point of view, they'd be called aniconic deities, because they are devoid of the normal features that you would see in, let's say, a human-like form or a statue. They're not fully aniconic. A fully aniconic deity would be like a Govardhan Shila or a Shalagram Shila. But they're sort of half aniconic. It's just a big face. If we undressed the deity, which we don't do, you can see it here. You can see how there's some little arms like this, and you can see on the front of the arms where the hands would be, you can see Balaram has a plow and a club, and Jagannath has a chakra, and he has a conch shell. Vishnu has 4 symbols. He has the shank, the conch, chakra, the wheel, gada, the club, and padma, the lotus. But if you only have 2 symbols to choose from, the 2 symbols become the chakra and the conch, fire and water. And in fact, when you get initiated in the Sri Vaishnava Sampradaya, which is a Vaishnava tradition with maybe, 50 million followers. It's a very, very large tradition. They brand you. They get a hot brand, they stick it in the fire, and they brand you with the symbols of Vishnu. And you get two symbols. You get, on your right arm, you get a chakra, and on your left arm, you get a conch. And you get branded with fire. Buddhists also sometimes will brand 3 dots in the top of their heads. You don't normally see it unless you're tall and looking down on them. But if you look at Theravada Buddhists, they'll brand themselves. And our Vaishnava tradition also does this. We brand ourselves. We do what's called a cool brand with tilak. And that's why we mark our body with tilak. They mark their body with a hot brand. And it's called tapa, which literally means heat or austerity, and they literally burn their skin, but they burn it with these 2 symbols, and the 2 symbols stand in for the 4, and so Jagannath has a chakra and a conch, and then we give him a club. We give him a club, and we give him a physical club. If you look on this side of him, you'll see a club, or Jagannath, actually we give Jagannath a flute, because he's Krishna. Balaram gets a club and a plow, a physical club and plow. So our whole system of worship largely derives from Jagannath Puri and the way Jagannath is worshipped in Jagannath Puri. It's Jagannath, Balaram, and their sister Subhadra Devi. Jagannath, Baladev, and Subhadra. So Krishna and Balaram had a sister, her name was Subhadra, and they're worshipped together. Subhadra is the yellow deity, Baladev's the white deity, Jagannath's the black deity. Jagannath is Krishna, Baladev obviously is Balabhadra, Balaram, and then Subhadra is in yellow. And it's a very old system of worship, almost tribal. And in fact, there's a bunch of tribal people, what would be called Adivasis, Savaras, and other indigenous people who in India would be considered to be scheduled castes and tribes. In India, they have a system of reservations. It's like affirmative action, where they make sure that the original inhabitants or the smaller minority groups are represented in parliament and are also given government subsidies. It's a very, very aggressive system of where there's actually a certain amount of seats within, I believe, the lower house of parliament, which are reserved for the scheduled castes and tribes. They get some representation in the government, roughly equivalent to if like we had a certain amount of our House of Representatives had to be black. Like it would be equivalent to that. And there's a very aggressive system of affirmative action. And so at the Jagannath Temple, these indigenous people who are the local indigenous inhabitants of the jungles and such of Odisha, they do various worship of Jagannath. They have certain festivals that they're in charge of, that they get to participate in. This is one of them. And we consider all of you to be like indigenous people. we consider all of you to be, that was a joke. We don't actually consider you. First of all, there's nothing wrong with being indigenous. And also, I was just making a joke. You are not forest dwellers. You're regular city folk like all of us. But on this day, even if you're wearing pants and a shirt, sewn cloth, even if you're not initiated, even if you eat meat, we don't care. We let you come up and bathe the deities. It's a special thing we do. Once a year at this temple and in all of the ISKCON temples around the world is that we hold a public abhishek and everybody gets to come and bathe the deity, irrespective of what their personal lifestyle is or how they're dressed. Normally you have to wear unsewn cloth. So no shirt. We wear just a chadar and a dhoti when we go on the altar. And then we have to take bath. And once we take bath, we're not allowed to urinate or drink water or eat or touch our ears or touch our nose. Then we have to do a bath with mantra called Achman afterwards. Then we have to chant a number of additional mantras and do what's called a Bhuta Shuddhi, and then we become able to go on the altar. It's part of our ritual culture. And so when we do an abhishek, the priests all follow all those rules. But on today, everybody gets to bathe. This is not what happens in Jagannath Puri, where this festival comes from. So much of our religious calendar and much of our religious holidays center around the cult of Jagannath. And in fact, the word juggernaut in English, which is an unstoppable evil force, came from the word Jagannath. Because when Christian missionaries went to Jagannath Puri to convert the local people to Christianity, and they saw the Rath Yatra festival going on with these huge, massive icons on these 40-foot chariots being carried through the streets by the devotees, they were so horrified that they used the word Jagannath. They mispronounced it Juggernaut, and they loaned it into the English language to refer to an evil, unstoppable force, namely the pagan religious icons of their rivals in the country they were ruling. That's the history of the word juggernaut in English. Jagat-nath, the Lord of the world. Jagat-nath. But if you say Jagat-nath, you actually have to say Tana. Tana. It's hard to say. So Jagat-nath means Lord of the world. To make it easier, it's contracted and the T softens to an N and it becomes Jagannath. And it becomes easier to pronounce. So that's where the word Jagannath comes from. And so once a year in the month of Jeshta, which is in June, at the hottest part of the year on the full moon day, in the morning time, they perform this Snana Yatra. The deities of Jagannath are brought out the day before to a Snan Bedi. It's a large bathing platform with a pandal. It's built up high so the devotees can stand below it and look up at it. It's like a big stage. And the deities are brought out from the main temple to that Snan Bedi. And then they bring like 130 of these gold and copper vessels with water that's drawn from a special well towards the north of the property. The Jagannath temple is a large compound. They have a special well there. They draw the water from that well, and they bring it, and then they fill up 108 kalashes with this water that was brought in these sacred vessels. And this is done by those indigenous priests who also serve at the temple. And then they bring the deities out, and they dress them in a white silk cloth, very simply, and they powder them with vermilion, with kumkum, and then they bathe them. And Jagannath, like that egg tempera painting, is a natural pigments. So Jagannath is painted with natural pigments, not with oil-based paint. Once there was the advent of oil-based paint in the 1500s, then painting changed forever. But prior to that, to get a permanent paint was very difficult, which is why they oftentimes use egg as a medium. And so after the 1500s, they started using oil-based paint. Of course, they would never do either oil-based paints, or to speak of this other paint, this egg-based paint that I've spoken about earlier. So they use natural pigments, but the nature of those pigments is they wash off very easily. And so most of our deities in our temple get bathed. We pour water over the deity every day and wipe them down fully. And they get ritually bathed every day, but they're made out of marble or ashtadhatu, some eight metals, and they're easy to bathe and polish and make nice. But Jagannath is made out of wood. It's a wood deity, a wood tribal, anachronistic deity that's unique. No deity like this is worshipped anywhere else in India. It's very, very special. In this town, where the whole state is devotees of Jagannath. And all of their art, and all of their cloth, and all of their weaving, and their sari production, and everything else has this Jagannath motif to it. And so they paint the deity with these natural pigments, and when it gets bathed with all this water from these 108 kalashes, then the colors run. And the deity loses so much of its color. So then they have this gajavesh that they put on the deity. This beautiful gold and silver outfit. It's an elephantine motifed outfit. So Jagannath is surrounded by a big, huge gold and silver, almost like a helmet, and all you can see is just his eyes. And then his mouth gets covered by the trunk of an elephant, also made of gold and silver. And so you can just see his eyes, so you can't see that the paint is run, because they have this very clever outfit they put on Jagannath, and he gives this once a year Gajavesh, Hatiyavesh outfit, this elephant outfit. And then he disappears. And he goes into seclusion for 15 days. And that period is called the Annavasara. The Annavasara. The Annavasara is a period of time every year where Jagannath disappears. And he's not able to be seen by the devotees. And so normally they go every day, because Jagannath is the center of their world, the center of the town, located in the middle of the town. And so people might go every day to see the deity. But for this, and pilgrims are coming from all over, all the time. But during this time period, they can't see Jagannath. And so there's a whole thing with the Alarnath temple and the whole way they cope. And there's the Potit Pavan, which is the painting just on the inside of the Simhadwar, where you can see Jagannath, even if you're not allowed in the temple. The Jagannath temple does not allow non-born Hindus into the temple. So if you have white skin or black skin, no dice. If you are Latino or Latina and you look sort of Indian-esque, then you might be able to get in. There are ways around it. Maybe you get a really good tan or something like that. You might be able to get in the temple. But if you go as a Hare Krishna devotee, then they really look at you. They want to deny you entrance. There's a famous prophecy that Western devotees will come and steal Jagannath away. And so they'll have more bhakti and they'll steal Jagannath away. And so they've been afraid of Western devotees for some time now. And the rise of the Hare Krishna movement really struck the fear of God into them. But anyway, there was a king of Puri who married a Muslim, which is a super massive no-no. And so he was no longer allowed to go in the Jagannath temple. But they felt bad for him, that their king could not go in the Jagannath temple anymore because they followed this rule. And so they did a painting of Jagannath, and just inside the main gate, it was called the Simhadwar, the Lion Gate, on the right side you see this beautiful painting of Jagannath's face. And so the king would come to the gate and bow down and worship there, and that's where that came from. Anyway, there's a whole culture. And if you're a Hare Krishna devotee and you go to Jagannath Puri or you study their method of worship, you see all ways in which we have borrowed from them. And our sect has borrowed from that culture. And the Snana Yatra is one of them, with the bathing of the deity. And then the Rath Yatra that we'll be celebrating a week from now is also, that's a huge thing they do. They build these 40-foot high chariots out of wood from the local forests, and there's no nails or screws, and the wheels are put together completely by an old technology where you just insert wood into wood. And then the chariots pull Jagannath, he's pulled by rope by the chariots from Main Street, from one end of the town to the other, and then Jagannath stays for 7 days at the other end of town in this beautiful garden called Gundicha, and then comes back. And that represents when the gopis and the Brajajana came to Kurukshetra after Krishna moved to Dwarka, and they met Krishna in Kurukshetra at the time of the eclipse, and they pulled him back to Vrindavan because they wanted Krishna to be back in Vrindavan, because when Krishna was dressed in his royal garments, they did not feel as intimately connected with him, and they wanted him to come back to Vrindavan so that he could be one of them again. and play his flute, play on the banks of the Jamuna, and not be in this kingly attire. So there's a whole Rath Yatra, which you'll hear about next week. But so much of what we do comes from Puri. And you wore an ikat sari. You wore an ikat sari today because it's Snana Yatra, right? So even our devotees, they know this, so they wear. And yeah. So the deity comes out, it's bathed, the colors run, it gets this Gajavesh, and then there's the Anavasara. Anavasara is a very interesting word in Sanskrit. When you have a word that starts with an A, when you have a word that starts with any other letter besides an A, oftentimes you'll put an A in front of it, it means the opposite. Just like in English, theist and atheist. But what do you do when you have a word that starts with the letter A and you want to say the opposite? Then you put an A-N in front of it. And so Anavasara is Ana and Avasar. Avasar is another combination of words. Ava means down, and Sar means water. And so Avasar means the time when it rains. And because rain is considered to be very auspicious in India, in any agrarian culture, any traditional culture, then Avasar, which means rain, the time when the rain comes down, the time when the water falls from the sky, that means an opportune moment, a wonderful moment. And Anavasara means an inopportune moment, a bad moment. Why is it bad? Because you can't see Jagannath. And so Jagannath goes into seclusion for 2 weeks, and he's fed a diet of fruits and paneer. Fruits and paneer. And he's given Das Mula Ayurvedic medicine by the king's Vaidya, by the king's doctor. So the king has a traditional Ayurvedic doctor. He's the Raj Vaidya. And that Raj Vaidya is loaned to Jagannath for 2 weeks, and he nurses Jagannath back to health. And so the deity is not able to be seen. They put a painting up where Jagannath is. You can look up there now and you can see a painting of Jagannath. We've removed Jagannath. So now you can see a painting of Jagannath. You're not able to see Jagannath. And you feel some separation. And then after 2 weeks, Jagannath has been repainted. He's been nursed back to health. And then he comes out. And at one, just when the deity has to be brought out, the deities weigh, at the very least, they weigh many hundreds of pounds. And it takes, 5 or 10 men to move the deities. And the Shabaras, the indigenous people who perform the worship of Jagannath, they're kind of big and stout. In fact, one of them won the Indian National Bodybuilding competition last year. He's particularly stout, really big guy. And so they have all these really large, generally fat, but also strong men, and they pick up the deities and they move them step by step, because they can't just pick them up and carry them. It's too heavy. So the most they can do is they can lift up, almost like doing a big deadlift, and then they move them forward, and they have these pillows, and they move them from one pillow to the other, all the way from the temple to the chariot. It's a whole thing. It takes hours. And every time they land on the pillow, the massive monster pillow, the pillow explodes because the weight of it blows the pillow up and all the stuffing shoots out from the side of the pillow. Then they have to hoist the deity up with ropes and get it on the chariot. Then the chariot is pulled with ropes. There's no driving system. It's just thousands of pilgrims who hold onto the ropes and pull the chariot. Sometimes they pull it off the road a little bit. There's a kirtan party in front of it. It's a huge, massive festival that's attended by more than 1 million people every year. At least pre-COVID it was. I don't know what the numbers are nowadays. So yeah, that's the festival we're doing now. So, and here's a beautiful verse. Just now that you've kind of got a feel, And sometimes we think of our temples, sometimes they call our temple New Jagannath Puri because we're on the bank of an ocean and we have Jagannath deities. Sometimes that name comes up. Sometimes they always like to call us New Jharkhand, but then Jharkhand got named after a state, so it's almost like calling your temple New Bengal or something like that. And we're not sure what name Prabhupada gave. I'm not sure. Shrudi's been trying to convince me for 25 years that he gave the name New Jharkhand, but I've researched and I can find no record of it anywhere, and so I'm not 100% convinced. Normally we name our temple communities after some tirtha, like New York, named after York, or New Hampshire, named after Hampshire in England. So we like to name our temples new after some other place. In fact, we have a precedent for this. We have Nava Vrindavana Sangam in the play Lalita Madhava by Rupa Goswami, written 5 centuries ago. In Dwarka, there was a garden, and that garden was called Nava Vrindavana, New Vrindavan, because it was a replica of the original Vrindavan. Anyway, so now that we have a feel for Jagannath Puri, where all of our savants moved, where Chaitanya Mahaprabhu spent 18 years, where the cult of worshipping Jagannath came up, where we got the word Juggernaut from, where Rath Yatra comes from, where Snana Yatra, that we'll be celebrating today, comes from, where these local tribesmen to this day are allowed by law, by governmental regulation, to worship the deity. And they have their beautiful rituals, which have merged with the worship of Krishna and kind of all came together very beautifully. And where now all the temples in Odisha, they all do this Snana Yatra with their local deities. I didn't know that. But I was reading up today about Snana Yatra and I found out that all the local temples in Jagannath Puri are doing this. I learned something new today. And where you see Jagannath's face everywhere you go, almost like graffiti, and where the symbols of Vishnu show up on the cloth, and where even other deities like Ganesh or Durga end up with Jagannath's face because everybody is the devotee of Jagannath. And even the Tantrics say, oh, Jagannath is our deity. The Buddhists, they say Jagannath is our deity. You find Jagannath's face on Buddhist temples. You find Jagannath's face on Durga temples. It's everywhere, carved into stone, in the art form, in the iconography, and where they keep this indigenous style of painting alive, and the carving of the deities is done in a very, very tribal-esque way. So much of our tradition comes from there. And so we can now read a verse. It's a beautiful verse. Mahambo des tire. So, on the shore of the great ocean. Ambuddha, Mahambode, of the great ocean. Tire, on the shore of the great ocean. Kanaka ruchire nila shikare. This is like Sanskrit poetry at its best. Kanaka ruchire, in an effulgent golden. Nila shikare, in an effulgent golden on top of the sapphire. Nila shikare. Shika means top. Shikare means like the top point. Shikare means on the top point. And then, just like a shika, also from the same root, top of your head. And then, nila means dark blue, but it also refers to sapphires. But then the mountain that the Jagannath temple is on is called Nilachal, the blue mountain. So on top of the blue sapphire, that's a poetic way of saying on top of the blue mountain, in a shining, brilliant gold palace. Vasan prasadanta, in a temple, in a palace. Prasad here means, sad means to rest or to sink, and so prasad means a place where you can rest, tranquility. The primary meaning of the Sanskrit word prasad is tranquility. So it's being used here in this way, in a place of rest, in a temple, in a palace, in a shimmering golden palace. Prasadanta, in the palace. Vasan, living in that palace, residing in that palace. Sahaja Balabhadrena Balina, with his very strong brother Balabhadra. It's like a doubling up. Balabhadrena Balina. With Balabhadra, with the strong one. Subhadra Madhyasta, and with Subhadra in the middle. Sakala Sura Seva Vasarada, giving opportunities for service. Seva Vasarada, giving opportunities for service. Same word avasara is being used here. Seva avasara, giving opportunities for seva. So we're getting ready to celebrate the anavasara, which is an inopportune moment, but this is seva avasar. This isn't a rainfall, monsoon moment of service. Sura, to the devotees. Jagannath Swami, Nayanapata, on the path of my eyes. Gami, he's going on the path of my eyes. Bhavatu me, let that be that the Lord Jagannath travels along the path of my eyes. It's like a Ratha Yatra, there's a vision. Jagannath is moving, and I want that vision of Jagannath to move across my eyes. Bhavatu, it's like in Sanskrit, they have this benedictive case. This Ashirvad, Lin, this benedictive case. And so when you conjugate verbs in Sanskrit, like you estar, está, estamos, estuvimos, estuvi, like you conjugate verbs in Spanish or in any of the Romance language, you also conjugate verbs in Sanskrit. You do so by adding suffixes. We do this in English. To work, working, worked, will work. We do the same thing in English. You add suffixes. Bhavatu it's a suffix used specifically in Sanskrit when you're giving a blessing, when you're praying for something. You're saying, let it be that this happens. Let it be. Let it be that Jagannath once again travels across the path of my eyes. But it's got this doble entendre, this double meaning. And the double meaning is just like the on top of the sapphire means on top of the blue mountain. It's a double meaning. And so similarly, you have this double meaning that I want to see the Rath Yatra again because I miss Jagannath. We sing this song during the Anavasara. When Jagannath is invisible to us, then every day we sing this song. And we're praying, let me see Jagannath again, because when am I going to see him next? I'll see him at the Rath Yatra. So when will that be that I can see Jagannath again at the Rath Yatra? But it also has a more esoteric meaning. When will I again be united with Krishna? When will I see Krishna again? And we'll sing this song in just a moment. When we bring the deities out for the bathing, we'll sing this song. And so this song will be getting sung, the Jagannathastakam, traditional song, written in Sanskrit, sung at the Jagannath temple. We now have made a Snan Bedi, a bathing platform, where everyone can watch the deities be bathed. We are even a little bit more aggressive in our ecumenism, because we don't just have some members of some tribes come and bathe the deity as priests, but we actually let the public bathe the deity. And then it's actually kind of nice. In the Purnima, in the month of Jyeshta, which is in June, the monsoons haven't hit yet in India. So it's just insanely hot. It's so hot. And honestly, the rains don't hit North India like they do Odisha. It's near the ocean, and the rains hit very powerfully there. It rains for weeks and weeks on end with no ceasing. We were at one house on Padayatra, and they were taking care of us, and then the rain started. And they looked miserable, because once it starts raining, they could never kick us out of their home. So they had a whole group of brahmacharis in their home that they just spent a lot of money feeding. And then the rains hit, and the rule is when the rains hit, you have to let the people stay in your home until the rains quit. That's why, during Chaturmas, the sadhus would just stay in one place. And wherever they happen to be during those 4 months, then they were set. They don't move. They sit in one place. So we joked with him. We said, oh, just see, it's raining. We have to stay with you for at the very least several weeks or months. And these are pious people. I mean, so many of our devotees come from Odisha, because when we would go there on Padayatra, they would see us and they would say, you please take my son with you. He's spiritually inclined. Let him be one of your devotees. They would donate their children to the mission. It's like almost inconceivable in the West, but I mean, so many of our devotees come from that. We went to a village, they were inspired, and they said, hey, you take our eldest son, or you take our second eldest son, he has a spiritual inclination, you make him into a priest. And they stayed with us. Some of my best friends, who I met, 30, 40 years ago, who joined on Padayatra, they're still there. And then we laughed, and we said, it's okay. We travel even in the rain, and we put on our ponchos and went out in the rain and walked in the rain. So in the Snana Yatra, it's super hot out, so they're cooling Jagannath. But then they put too much water on him, and then he gets a little cold. And then you have to bring in the king's physician, to nurse him back to health. And he's hidden, he's sequestered. We don't just feed curd and fruit. We feed fruit. We also feed some teas. We make some elixirs, and we make khichdi every day, like real plain khichdi. So he gets his own diet for the next 2 weeks. And so this will be your last chance to see Jagannath before he goes into the Anavasara. And then we cultivate feelings of separation. We sing this song, and we think about how much we miss Jagannath. And here's where we're supposed to go. Na va yache rajam. Na va yache rajam. Na yache. I do not pray. Vai. I certainly, definitely do not pray. Rajam. For a kingdom. Jagannath is in a Kanaka Ruchire Prasad. He's in a beautiful golden temple. Nila Shikade, sitting on top of a sapphire-like blue mountain. But Navayache Rajam, I don't pray for a kingdom or wealth. Na cha kanaka manikya vibhavam. I don't pray for gold or gems. Vibhavam. I don't pray for this opulence. Vibhavam means opulence of kanaka manikya, of gold and gems. I don't want a beautiful palace. I don't want a kingdom. I don't want money, gold, gems. Na yacheham. I also don't pray for Ramyam, Sakala Jana Kamyam Vada Vadhum. I don't pray for a beautiful and chaste wife. I don't pray for a beautiful... Ramya means beautiful. Vara Vadhum means like a very good wife. Which is Sakala Jana Kamyam, which is desired by all people. If you're a woman, then you would just flip this, and you don't pray for an illustrious husband. I don't pray for a kingdom or a palace or a home. I don't pray for wealth or money or security. I don't even pray for a good partner. Ramyam Varavadum Sakka Jana Kamyam, which would be, anybody would pray for this. I don't pray for that. Sada kale kale Pramata patina gita charito. Pramata pati. Pramata pati is a name for Shiva. He is the pati, the lord of Pramata, the ghosts and goblins, the maddened ones. So Gita Charito, his glories are sung by Lord Shiva. I'm not praying for any of these things, but that person whose glories are sada kale kale, Always, every moment, they're sung by Lord Shiva. Jagannatha Swami, Lord Jagannath. Nayana Patagami. Bhavatume. Please let him be on the path of my eyes. And so as we miss Jagannath, we start to think about what's valuable in our life, and the things which are dispensable and the things which are indispensable, and what wealth we truly possess, what is truly beautiful and meaningful in our lives. And that is Krishna. That's our spiritual life. That's our relationship with Krishna. And we remind ourselves, I don't need all these things. I just need to see Krishna again. And then the prayer finishes. Hadam tvam papanam samsara. Hadam tvam samsara jutataram asaram surapate. Surapate. O Lord of the demigods, a name for the Supreme Lord. The Lord of the Suras, the Lord of the demigods, the Lord of all godly people. Surapate, just like Hare Krishna is calling out in the vocative. Surapate, calling out, O Surapati! O my Lord of lords, King of kings, Lord of lords. Hada Tvam. You take away samsara. You take away samsara. Juta tadam. You quickly take away my suffering in samsara, which is asadam. It's useless. Please take away my useless material existence. Hada tvam papanam vitatim. Please take away. I have a treasure. What is my treasure? I have a treasure. Papanam vitatim. I have a treasure of sins. I don't want any more treasure in terms of money, but I do have a treasure. I have my treasure of sins. Hada tvam, you take away my treasure of sins. Aparam yadavapate, you take away my unlimited treasure of mistakes. I have an unlimited storehouse of mistakes. Aparam vitatim, a storehouse which is unlimited of the mistakes I've made. Hadatvam, take it away. Yadavapate, O Lord of the Yadus. Aho dine nate, nihita chodana, nischittam idam. Nischittam idam. This is true. This is true. What is true? That nihita chadana, your feet, you are the person whose feet are bestowed upon those who are dina anate, who feel themselves to be humble and fallen and unqualified. Your mercy is bestowed upon those people who stop trying to make themselves big in this world and who actually cry out in great helplessness and feeling. Let me say that again. You got distracted. This is true. What's true? That your mercy is given to not those people who are wealthy and powerful and beautiful, but to those people who can really cry out helplessly, who have real humility, who give up trying to make it in this world, who give up trying to be big people on their own in this world, and who just surrender and cry out and look to you for shelter. Jagannatha Swami, Noyana Patagami, Bhavatume. Let that Lord Jagannath become the object of my vision. So, this is a super special day for us. We're going to sing the Jagannathasakam. We've explored a few verses from it. We're going to sing it. The whole thing is beautiful. It juxtapositions these amazing lessons with a beautiful vision of the Lord. We're following in the footsteps of our tradition going back thousands of years in Jagannath Puri. It's just amazing. Thank you, Shri. if he'd stuck around and just been a little, he had such an ego, you could see. His head was like up in the sky like this, like he was like trying to look down his nose at the world. He was a short man, but he was putting his head up as high as it could go so he could try to look down on people. He won't get to be a Jagannath. If he could have just humbled himself a little bit, he would have gotten a chance. We would have even invited him, given him a little achman, chant a few mantras. We would let him bathe. But he disqualified himself. His ego was too big. He couldn't even come in and quiet himself down for a few minutes. So there's this juxtapositioning, this beautiful vision of Jagannath, combined with what it takes to be able to see him. And we don't want to just see Jagannath for the Rath Yatra. We want to see Jagannath in our hearts. We want to see Jagannath playing his flute in our hearts. And so we have a ways to go, miles to go before we sleep. We have to walk this path of bhakti, which means humbling ourselves and really learning how to cry out in great feeling. So we're going to sing this song. The deity is going to come out. It's a miracle. We're all going to get to bathe the deity, even though we're so unqualified. He's going to run away. That's going to increase our separation. A week from now, we're going to come back. He's going to appear in our midst. We're going to nurse him back to health, repaint him. It's a beautiful celebration, following in the footsteps of these beautiful tribal devotees who've been doing this for thousands of years, and our own tradition, which has been picking up their beautiful mood of devotion and kind of adjusting it and making it real sweet on the shore of the ocean. And we replicate that festival. Jagannath Swami ki? All right, so you can stay sitting. Yeah, you can turn off. Thank you. You can stay sitting. We're going to do a sit-down kirtan.